A public group called #NoEvictions has raised alarm over people who are committing suicide due to harassment by landlords. The Facebook-based group, led by Nanandi Albers, has been mobilizing on behalf of people who cannot meet their monthly rental because of the loss of income due to COVID-19. Albers, who's also advocating for a moratorium on evictions, says that they've been overwhelmed with requests for help. To discuss this a little further, I am now joined by Nanandi Simone Albers on Zoom. Thanks so much indeed for joining us, Nanandi. Welcome to the program.
Peter, thank you for the platform.
All right, so what inspired you to start this group?
I've always had a passion for evictions, particularly after I myself was unlawfully evicted many years ago. And I realized then how the system is just not working already a long time ago. So I am a human and legal rights practitioner consultant by profession. And then I started showing a big interest in rental law and the eviction process. And I've actually been instrumental in this for many years now. And when lockdown came, because I'm involved in this, quite a few people started connecting with me and saying, look, I'm having this problem, that's going on. My landlord's locked me out. My electricity has been switched off, or these kind of things. And initially I looked for what was going on Facebook, and I saw there were one or two groups, but I felt that they were a little bit radical, and I wanted to bring in a very neutral page that also acknowledges that landlords themselves are being impacted by this, and but predominantly that any abuse of the system or where the system isn't working gets addressed. And that was the initiative.
All right, we're going to talk a little bit about COVID-19 and what was promised by government, but let's just start with the evictions themselves. From your experience, typically, what kind of things do landlords do that are just wrong and aren't allowed to do that tenants should be aware of?
The most common that we're having happen is disconnection of electricity, and in a lot of cases, disconnection of water and electricity. So we've got cases where a home is literally sitting with no power and not a drop of water. This is the most common one. The second most common one is to lock people out of their premises, like if they leave, especially now that we're in a more relaxed state of regulations, if they leave to go to work or something, they come back and find that they've been locked out of their places. And literally everything is inside. They left this to take someone to school, kids, and they came back and they locked out. We've had a few more serious cases where people have come in and physically tried to throw tenants' things out the door or manhandle them. We've had cases where there have been real intimidation. We had a situation once where a gentleman arrived with a firearm. He didn't do anything with it, but he made it known he had it on him while intimidating a tenant. So we have, but the most common is water, electricity, and being locked out.
All right. So what should landlords be doing? Let's say tenants are not paying their rent, they're in arrears, and they're not paying the electricity bills as well. What steps should they take so that everybody's on the right side of the law?
This is obviously a very complex question, and the first thing many people say is, but what about the landlord? And my response, if I can answer you this way, is that by the time the landlord has suffered, the tenant has suffered. So you'll find most of them are prepaid. There isn't that many that are electrical accounts, but the landlord, if they're a bondholder, they have been given options by the banks. If they are not, many landlords, this is their income. But what we find is that there needs to be a meeting of parties. They need to come together and they need to look for solutions because everybody's been impacted by this. But what we're finding is that there is I almost want to say a bias towards the landlord must get his or her rental while the tenant has been put in a position that was of their own, not of their own doing. So they're not in willful breach. They're not in negligent breach, but they're being called to rectify a breach that they didn't cause. So as to where the answers is, this is why I feel there should be a moratorium, because at the moment it really is a dog chase tail case. And there isn't an instant solution, but what is happening is landlords are applying by the dozens at the moment for eviction applications or for rental summonses and this. And it is now becoming a one-way street where the landlord is seeking legal retribution for their piece of the pie, while the tenant, who had no intention of getting into the position they're in, are now being forced to give something that they don't have to give.
A lot of these landlords are on sort of buy to let, aren't they? And so they've got a bank that's knocking on their door. Should they be having a conversation with their banks to say, listen, this is my situation, this is what COVID has done, so that even the banks get involved in this conundrum?
Peter, I really feel, and it's what I've been saying for a while to a few people in the role players field that I've been speaking to, that we actually need a mediated session where we've got the banks, where we've got government, where we've got various parties looking for a solution. I feel, and my idea of a moratorium has been born out of the Center for Disease Control in the States, who is calling for a moratorium on all evictions. Now, keep in mind that evictions doesn't necessarily mean just tenants. You have many property owners who are bond holders, and while some of them got bond breaks, a lot of them might well have lost their companies, lost their jobs, and going forward, they're probably also going to come into arrears on their bonds, and they themselves will possibly be facing evictions. So this is a problem that needs to be addressed, and I just feel that we should not be looking at normal law here. This isn't a normal eviction process. This isn't a normal non-bond payment. This is a set of circumstances that was inadvertently forced on people, and we are now going back to normal contract law to say, but hang on a sec, you've breached your contract here, be it a lease or be it a bond, and you must now perform. But the reason for the break was the same as the force majeure concept. It was an outside force that placed people in this position.
How are the courts working at the moment? Are they? You're saying that you're inundated with all of these eviction applications, and some of these then come to execution. How are the courts helping, assisting, or are they just handing out these eviction execution orders?
Diplomacy is not my strong point, so I had to have a strong talk to myself before I came on air. But I'm very frustrated that the courts are even accepting a lot of these applications that are coming in, because a lot of people are sending me their paperwork. And from what I'm seeing is the attorneys and or whoever's making the applications are not declaring the true facts. They're merely going to breach of contract. You're in arrears. You must pay me. You must get out of my property. And you are obliged by law to disclose all known facts to a court when coming in with an application, which means that if your tenant has tried to negotiate with you, and we've got many tenants who get hold of me and say, but I've begged my landlord, please, can I pay off? My job started up again, or I'm willing to do this, or I've done that. And we're not seeing this information coming into the applications. And level 2 regulations are very clear that there has to be a variety of factors considered before an eviction application should be brought or should be considered by the courts. And I'm finding that the courts are not themselves looking at this, and they are now starting to just issue eviction notices. And the other thing is that the current regulations, in my personal opinion, are flawed in that they are placing all the emphasis now on the rental tribunal. And the rental tribunal was closed for a long time during lockdown, so there wasn't even access to them. And they're now being overwhelmed. And I personally feel a lot of the guys in rental tribunal are not equipped to manage this process. So a lot of times they're going into mediation, and I'm getting people phoning me and saying, but all they did was ask me, when am I going to pay my arrears in the rental tribunal mediation? And when I asked them about COVID, so again, this is why I feel we need a moratorium until we have some answers.
All right. I think your voice has been heard certainly on this channel and people watching. Let's hope the authorities listen to this as well, and maybe you can find this middle ground that will accommodate everybody. Now, Nandi, thanks very much indeed for joining us, and people can go to your Facebook site, #NoEvictions, I guess.
If I can just please make it very clear that it is an advice and support group. It is not a chat group.
Okay.
So we are there to act as a support.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much indeed, Nanandi. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
All right, okay, so there you have it. Hashtag no evictions. Some of you may be in trouble because of COVID-19. There is some relief there.